Welcome back to another RWBY fanfiction reading. And this time it's, the third part. Possibly. I tried to mix possibly and probably into one word and it didn't really work out. But this is possibly the last part of this one. And then we can, do the next one, which I haven't actually looked at to see what it was. I don't even remember what that one is. Whatever. Let's just do this. Chapter 9 or 8, whatever. Blake's POV. I look up at Yang, wide-eyed. The sunlight filtering in from the nearby window making her hair glow golden. I relax a little more with given time, hearing the yes echo in my mind over and over. I smile softly as I look up slowly from the floor. What? Yang smiles at me and she says it again, her answer becoming more firm, confident as she stands up a little straighter. Yes. I furrow my brow as I realize that she said yes. She said yes. I start to panic as realization sets in. I blink a few times as a soft smile creeps onto my face. Without realizing it, I slowly uncurl my fingers and reach out a bit to take her hand, noticing a little too late what I was doing. I took in a breath quickly, hoping not to be heard as I looked down at the ground again, holding my hand to my side nervously. Yang bent down to look me in the eye, to smile at me. I smiled softly back as she lifted up my chin. She took my hand softly, gently in hers, and kissed me on the cheek. Immediately, I blushed a deep red. My eyes grew wide as my mouth fell into a straight line. She just kissed me on the cheek. I blushed deeper as the realization set in. As more and more time went by, a smile creeped its way onto my face, and the blush darkened in color. Thump, thump, thump. My eyes widened as I heard footsteps approaching, panic rising in my chest as the sound came closer, louder. I looked over to the end of the hall and was surprised to find nobody had come up yet. If they had, I would have been in big trouble, and super embarrassed. I looked to Yang, who gave me a calming smile, as if to say everything's all right, there's no reason to panic. I smiled and gave a small nod, giving her thanks for calming me down. If only a little, it worked. Finally, after what seemed an eternity of waiting, Ruby appeared at the top of the stairs, a smile on her face as she saw us together. I looked at her, giving her a small smile, hoping to cross how nervous I was. I smiled at her as she spoke up. Forget it. Sorry to bother you. She blushed as she spoke and smiled in improvement, seeming thankful that's something that's to see. Ruby turned around and made her way for the stairs, walking down them and out of sight. Chapter 10. 9. Whatever. Yang's POV. I watch Ruby walk down the stairs as a soft thump echoing her movements as I lift my gaze back to Blake, who looks nervous out of her mind. She looks over to the place where Ruby just stood just seconds ago in a trance. Blake? I ask her, hoping she'll snap out of it. She doesn't. I wave my hand in front of her face in an attempt to bring her back to reality, back to us. Blake. Earth to Blake. I snap my fingers in front of her face, and when that doesn't work, I bring my hands together to form a very loud clap, which finally brings her back to the real world and out of her paranoid mind. Your sister, oh my god. She looks up at me with wide eyes, a little too wide for my liking. She starts to pace very slowly at first, but as the minutes tick by on the clock, the speed increases, letting me know how nervous she is. When she turns around for what feels like the 100th time, I grab her by the shoulder, stopping her in her tracks and forcing her to talk to me. I spin her to face me with her body, and I bend down a little bit to meet her gaze, which is still staring at the floor in disbelief. Hey, relax. Ruby approves. I promise she doesn't hate you. It's very, very unlikely that she'll ever hate you. She can't even stay mad at why. I mean, it's not... I smile at her, hoping that the dog will help in my case as I stare down for a few seconds, watching the change as the message starts to sink into her beautiful little brain. Blake nods to me and smiles a tiny bit at the corner of her mouth. She straightens up and blinks a few times, seeming to have completely spaced out. I smile as I notice the small amounts of blush that never went away, clinging to her cheeks, refusing to let. I smile as the image of our kiss finally leaves my mind, hoping and praying that it didn't show on my face. That would have been so embarrassing. I blink back to reality and realize that I have to study with Ruby, which managed to escape my mind for over half an hour. How could it not? I blink again, hoping that I didn't look weird as I got up and looked over to her. Study, I said, pointing to the stairs, not able to form words right anymore. Yang nodded to me, and I turned towards the stairs, and once my back was turned to her, I pounded my forehead with my fist for how stupid I must have looked. How could I have managed to be such an idiot? For once, I decided to partner up with her sister and then come to her house for a study session without bothering to ask who her sister was. But that doesn't matter. What matters right now is me studying, like I was supposed to be doing half an hour ago. I sighed as I made my way down the stairs, ignoring the sounds of my shoes on the hardwood floors. On the first level, I wound my way through the kitchen, around the island in the center of the room, and over to the dining room table where my work was still sitting practically empty. I look over to Ruby. Let's get to work, I told her with a small smile, hoping that my schoolwork would distract me. I sat down and picked up my pencil in one motion and began to look through the textbook for answers to the questions. By the time the worksheet was done, it was almost 7. I was packing my things in peace, hoping I wouldn't be walked in on by Yang and make a fool out of myself again. Just as my luck would have it, Yang walks into the kitchen for a glass of water, her hair in a high and very sexy ponytail, the strands of her hair going wild, searching all over the place like the sun. I smiled. I hadn't even gotten to the good part. She's wearing shorts, very short ones. They clung to her body with what I could only guess was sweat. I snapped out of it, shaking my head and blinking myself out of the trance. I very angrily scolded myself and picked up my packed bag, swinging it over my shoulder in a hurry to get out of there. She smiled as she turned around, noticing I was there. Hey, she smiled and took a long sip of water, putting her head back in the process. I looked back at the sound of her voice. Hey, I gave her a small smile and started to make my way to the door with quick footing. She waved and smiled again as she walked back up to the walked back to the base of the staircase and walked up it. I stared for a few seconds before I blinked back to reality again and scolding myself again. I made my way out the door and down the walkway to my car. I stopped for a moment without knowing why. Something in my gut told me to look up. And when I finally did, there was a very beautiful girl with long blonde curls smiling down at me from her bedroom window, reminding me of the sun. Oh boy. Come on. Chapter 11, sort of. The dance was rapidly approaching, but I had no time to get ready for it, thanks to all the teachers handing out stacks of homework every day. I had no time to buy a dress or shoes or anything required for having fun and looking good at a dance. I sat in Professor Ubek's class learning the history of our great country, which was boring me to death like usual. Oh, come on. It's Dr. Ublek. Jesus. I sighed softly, so Ublek wouldn't hear, staring down at my paper and doodling. Yang and I, to be specific, us holding hands, and other things that if anybody bothered to look at, wouldn't live to tell about it. Yang came in late as usual, but something about her was off. She didn't come into the room with a smile full of rebellion or walk in like she owned the place, the usual Yang demeanor. I took a closer look, and she wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at anyone. She fixed her gaze to the back of the room, on the last seat in the row. She had shadowed eyelids like she was exhausted and couldn't bother to hide it. I fought the urge with all I had not to go over and ask what was wrong. She wasn't being the usual Yang. I looked back towards the front of the room where Ublek was handing out an assignment for tonight, a paper about the history of Vale and how the trade systems work between the countries. I sighed. Oh, thank God it's Friday. Otherwise, I would never get this done in time. The bell rang just as I was writing out the main points of my essay, brainstorming, so I'd have less to do at home. Yang got up instantly and walked towards the door at full speed, like she couldn't wait to get out of there. Like she needed to leave at this very second. I needed to go over and find out what was wrong with her, before the end of the day when she can escape with her car and avoid questioning. I packed up my things faster than I'd ever done before and ran out to catch up with Yang, managing to corner her off in the lunchroom. I took my place and set my things down on the table in front of me, afterwards turning my gaze to Yang. What's wrong? Look why do you look oh my why do you loo like you could sleep for millennia? I asked her with one eyebrow up and a gleam in my eye. I was up till 1 in the morning doing math that makes no sense, she says, already getting heated after a few simple words. Is that all? I thought something was seriously wrong. If you needed help with math, all you had to do was ask, I told her, putting a hand on her shoulder and smiling softly. Yang looked at me as if I was crazy before finally realizing I was being serious and nodding. Fine, will you tutor me? She asked me with the same stubborn look she always gets in class before finally asking for help. I nod to her, agreeing, and smile at her. We can even get started now if you'd like, I tell her, reaching out to my binder, which held a place at the table. What? To get paper and a pencil. She shook her head immediately. No, I just got done with math. Too tired to function. She pretended dramatically to be a robot, shutting down from loss of power. Yang was back. I silently cheered in my head. Okay, fine. Are you free tonight? I ask her around 4. She nods, and with a smile, she heads over to the lunch line, grabbing a tray and a milk, and standing behind a boy I'd seen. Grabbing a tray and a milk and standing behind a boy I'd seen in Ubuk's class just a few minutes ago. He had short blonde hair, and his outfit definitely wasn't fit for the school environment. Without a shirt stood Sun Wukong, smiling and flirting his way through the lunch line. I sighed, boys. He gave me a wink as he stood in line, which I replied to with a slight rolling of my eyes, crossing my arms over my chest, and gesture that hopefully came off to him as don't even try. He shrugged his shoulders after getting the response, smiling his usual shiny smile, eventually fading from sight as more and more people got into the line. Yang's POV. I stood in line, waiting for what seemed like an eternity to get my lunch. I looked back and saw Sun flirting with Blake, which should have been clearly off limits to anyone but me. Red-hot anger flared inside me. I gave Sun a look like I wanted to punch him in the face, because I did. Luckily, the line moved up enough that he couldn't see her anymore, and at that second, I slowly began to calm down as the jealousy in me subsided. As I got farther into the line, it started to speed up. Within mere minutes, I'd gotten my main meal and my side salad and fruit, and was paying for it at the cash register. Where I then took the tray over to Blake's table where she was reading instead of eating. You leave her alone for 2 minutes. I sat down the tray. The bang of the plastic brought her out of her book and back into reality. And I picked up my fork, poking lasagna and tearing off a piece. Blake would have gotten into her book again if I hadn't spoken up. So, I said, hoping that an inspiration would arise from within her to start an interesting conversation. She stared at me as if she expected me to continue the sentence. I looked at her intently, my eyes giving the signal for her to talk. She didn't. What do you want to talk about? I asked her, trying to get her to spark up a conversation. She didn't. There's not much to say, she said, then almost immediately, as if out of nowhere, her eyes lit up, and she sat up straight against the invisible wall the lunch table seats provided. Do you have a dress? She asked me with a nervous hint in her voice, like she was afraid. But why would she be afraid? I nodded, a piece of lasagna in my mouth, and chewed for a few awkward seconds before swallowing. Yeah, it's white. It's a halter dress, I tell Blake in a soft and very quiet voice. I don't want the entire student body to know that Yang Xiaolong wears dresses, or even goes to dance in the first place. Besides for the fact that they will know when you go to the dance, but whatever. Blake nods right as the bell rings. Half an hour goes by pretty dang fast when you're bored. I shrug as Blake stands, reaching out to grab her binder and textbook and starts to leave, stopping a last second by the doorway looking back at me. You gonna be okay if I go to class? She asks me. I nod, a smile before speaking. Go on without me. I'll see you in a minute, I tell her. She's almost convinced that I'll be fine, but before going, says one last thing. If you're too tired to focus in class, lay down in the nurse's office. It'll help, she tells me, hoping that I'll take the advice by how worried she looks. I'll be fine. Go. Don't be late for class, I tell her with a smile, shooing her away with my hands. Blake nods and walks out the door slower than she usually would, as if she's waiting for me to call her back, hoping for me to call her back. She should know me by now. I'm too stubborn to ask for help. Ugh. After a few minutes of moping in the cafeteria, I get up to walk to my least favorite class, biology with Professor Port. Yep. Yang's POV, again, in chapter 12, sort of. Okay. Tutoring sessions started quickly, and every time we met in that dusty old library, I had to keep myself from A, sneezing, and B, kissing the beautiful girl teaching me, which was a lot harder than it looked. Every time I looked at her, I felt the urge to tangle my fingers in her silky black hair and kiss those beautiful lips full of possibilities. I sat in class daydreaming about our secret meetings in the library, completely tuning him out, Professor Ublek. He was saying something about the Great War, but I was too much into my fantasy to care. I kept thinking about how silky her hair would feel tangled up in my fingers, and how it would slide away like a snake looking for cover if I held it too close. Sighing, I tuned back into the lesson just as the bell rang, a paper on my desk in front of me. It was a no textbooks assignment. Great, just my luck. This is what I get for dreaming about a beautiful girl. I picked up the paper, slide it into place in my folder, and get up before Ublek even notices me. I gave myself a thumbs up and you did it. Smiling, I made my way to the lunchroom, which had recently become my favorite room in the school because it was where Blake and I always talked, which was something to look forward to if you ask me. I smiled and sat in the lunchroom waiting for Blake to appear like she always did. She walks casually into the room, a stack of homework on top of her textbooks. As usual, I could expect no less from an honors student. Sitting down, Blake sets her things onto the table, closing her folder, only to get up again and wind. The papers showed themselves only slightly, still covered by the paper cover that held them together. A smile started across my face slowly as an idea popped in my head, an idea that I knew if caught I would get into so much trouble with Blake. But she was in the lunch line, I thought. She couldn't find out. It was virtually impossible. I followed my ambition, reaching out my hand to open her folder just as Blake appeared from behind one of the pillars holding out the lunchroom. It was either that or just for decoration. My smile faded into what I could only assume was a casual expression based on Blake's non-existent reaction. I pulled my hand back at lightning speed and picked up my fork to dig it into the orange chicken in front of me. Or at least, I thought it was orange chicken. One could only hope. Blake sat down opposite me, picking up her folder and squeezing it between the textbooks she carried, afterwards picking up her fork to eat as well, not suspecting that I was about to look into her very personal business, which I could only assume because of her need to keep the folder tightly closed. I wasn't being paranoid, right? Right? Doesn't matter. Nothing happened, I told myself, in an effort to convince myself, and weird as it was working. All I had to do was act like I didn't do anything, and technically I didn't get the chance. Shrugging slightly, hoping she wouldn't notice and ask, I scarfed a piece of chicken and a forkful of rice and chewed silently. Blake spoke up. What's wrong? She asked me. You're never this quiet. she pointed out casually. She was on to me. Dang it. I look over to her, nervous, out of my shoes. Luckily, thanks to drama, I was very good at pretending, so I did just that. Nothing. Why? I ask her casually, finishing chewing my chicken with a surprised expression on my face. No reason. Are you free this Wednesday? She asked me as she pokes another piece, looking me in the eye as she does. What? Becoming frantic as the conversation continues. Was she asking me out? For tutoring, Blake tells me with a confused glance, eyebrows furrowed slightly and eyes narrowed. I sigh in relief. Thank God, I wasn't ready to go out with a beauty like her. I'm not meant for dates. I nod to her and smile, staying silent out of the fear my mouth would run if I so much as parted my lips to speak. Blake nods awkwardly, looking back to her tray, which was almost empty. I would have given anything for her to be done with lunch so I could take a second alone to breathe after a success like that. My mood instantly took a turn for the worse and I remembered her weird glances. The way she looked confused after each word I spoke to her. She was suspicious, and people like Blake don't just drop things when they get nervous. I'd have to do a lot of damage control to get on her good and trusting side again. Blake was one tough cookie. I went to Pierce, which, upon poking, gave off a weird sound, almost like a mutated screech. I blinked back to reality after the unsettling sound and stood to empty my tray before classes again. Blake's POV. What's up with her? I watched her get up to dump her tray, the sunlight filtering in from the window to outline her long blonde hair, giving a golden glow around its edges. She glances nervously to the left and to her right. What on earth could be bothering such a beautiful mind? I sigh and place my attention, take my attention away from her, shifting my gaze to my tray that was still, with 20 minutes left, filled with food. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Sun walking towards the table. Sun approaches casually like he couldn't have a care in the world, then plops down next to me, sitting sideways on the seat, an arm propped up for support on the table, and his body facing me, giving me a very cocky smile the entire time. What's a pretty girl like you doing all alone? He asked me. I glanced behind me, scanning the lunch tables until I find him, blue mohawk standing out above the crowd. Neptune was said to be Sun's best buddy, his partner in crime. They spent practically every moment together picking up any girl they can find. They were actually pretty good, and I was not justifying picking up mostly innocent girls. I gave him a very sarcastic smile, trying to give him a hint to go away before Yang got back. If he was still here when she arrived, let's just say his pretty face wouldn't be so pretty anymore. Yang had a bit of a temper as of lately. I looked to the line of kids waiting to throw their junk away, and Yang was in the middle. She better get here soon. I'm not, I tell him, hanging on to the bit of information that I was sitting with Yang. Sun smiled and pointed his thumbs at himself. Yeah, because I'm here, he said in a very sad attempt of flirting. I shook my head and looked back to the line of kids finding Yang on the back to find Yang on her way back to the table. Yang is on her way back, I told him, pointing to her with a friendly smile as Yang approached the table sitting next to me. After getting a good look at the boy next to me, and a fire started to burn within her. Anybody who was looking could tell in an instant that it was bad. Sun smiled to Yang, trying, by what I could tell, to calm her down. Hi, he smiles nervously as he scratches the back of his neck with his free arm, looking almost terrified as he waits for her to calm down, waiting and waiting and waiting, but to no avail. Yang gives a small passive-aggressive smile as Sun takes the hint and stands to leave, looking at me to advocate to Yang for him. I refused, of course. He gave me puppy dog eyes as a last effort. If he knew me, he'd know that I didn't fall for that sappy stuff. Looking down, he walked away slowly, as if waiting for me to protest. I wouldn't. I had no reason to, after the sad way he tried to come on to me. Sighing, relieved that it was finally over, I turned back to greet a very angry Yang, and by her expression, I could tell she was trying to control it. I smiled at the effort. It was almost working. I almost couldn't tell she was even angry. I patted her shoulders, smiling softly. Bow as I walked away from the table and away from the adorable little lion sitting at the table. God. Okay. Um, okay, here's my problem. That this is already a 25-minute video, and it's like, oh, this is a super long chapter as well. Ugh. All right. Sadly, I'm gonna have to stop it here. I know this is really weird because it's like one more chapter, but whatever, whatever, whatever. Next time, we're going to finish up the story, at least for now. I'm kind of thinking that technically it's not finished, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see.